Women are running out of time, and the numbers do not lie. Recent data shows that a significant portion of women who once relied on traditional dating provisions now face stark economic realities without that support, leading to widespread frustration and urgent calls for change. Stick around until the end, because what happens next to those who built their lives around one model while rejecting another is not just predictable, but already unfolding in ways that will shock even the skeptics. Men have finally listened. After decades of being told to step back, to stop approaching, to accept labels like toxic for simply showing interest or providing in the ways society once expected, a growing number have done exactly that. They have stepped away entirely, choosing solitude, personal growth, and peace over the risks and costs of modern dating. This shift is not random or temporary. It stems from clear patterns that have built up over years. Women once condemned men for pursuing them, for offering compliments, for paying on dates as a gesture of interest. Those same women now express outrage that no one approaches anymore, that men seem indifferent, that the traditional courtship they once dismissed no longer exists. The irony runs deep. Men took the message to heart. They internalized the warnings about harassment claims, about being seen as creeps for simple interactions, about the imbalance where effort flows one way without guarantee of return. Now, many men find contentment in their own company, focusing on careers, fitness, hobbies, and friendships that do not carry the same emotional or financial burdens. This newfound freedom brings genuine happiness for many. They report lower stress, more disposable income, stronger mental health, and a sense of control over their lives that relationships often disrupted. Women notice this change acutely. Social media overflows with posts lamenting the lack of real men, the death of chivalry, the epidemic of nonchalant behavior where guys no longer chase or invest emotionally. Yet when men explain their withdrawal, pointing to past experiences of being used, ghosted, or shamed, the response often circles back to demands rather than reflection. The core issue lies in a long standing dynamic where many women expected provision without equivalent contribution, a pattern reinforced by cultural messages that positioned men as default providers while celebrating independence for women. Research highlights one particularly revealing aspect of this dynamic. Studies from reputable sources, including work published in the Society for Personality and Social Psychology Journal, indicate that between 23 and 33% of heterosexual women have admitted to going on dates with men they had no romantic interest in, solely for the free meal. In one survey of over 800 women, nearly a quarter acknowledged this behavior, while a follow up with several hundred more pushed the figure to a third. These women described arranging dates primarily for the entertainment and food, with no intention of pursuing anything further. This practice, sometimes called a foodie call, reveals a transactional element that many men grew tired of funding. Men began to recognize the pattern. They saw dates turn into one sided expenses where conversation stayed superficial, interest never materialized, and the bill arrived as expected. Over time, awareness spread through discussions, personal stories, and shared experiences. Men adjusted their behavior accordingly. Many stopped offering dinners as first dates, opting instead for coffee or casual walks, or simply ceased initiating altogether. The result is a noticeable decline in traditional dating invitations. Women who once counted on these outings for free meals or nights out now find fewer opportunities. This shift compounds other pressures. Inflation has driven up the cost of living dramatically across Western societies. Housing, groceries, utilities, and everyday essentials demand more income than ever before. Wages have not kept pace for many, particularly in sectors where women predominate. Jobs dry up or stagnate, leaving individuals scrambling to cover basics. For women who embraced the girl boss narrative, pursuing high powered careers while rejecting traditional support structures, the reality hits hard. Independence sounds empowering until bills accumulate without a buffer. Many discover that solo survival in this economy proves far more challenging than anticipated. The dating economy that once sustained some lifestyles has collapsed for a large segment. Women historically benefited from men's willingness to provide meals, gifts, assistance, and financial help during courtship and beyond. This support allowed some to stretch budgets, skip grocery shopping, or maintain appearances without full self reliance. When that pipeline closes, the gap becomes glaring. Men no longer feel obligated to fill it, especially after years of hearing that such provision reinforces outdated gender roles or enables entitlement. Those who once played the role of simp, always ready to pay or rescue, have largely moved on as well. Many redirect their attention to personal pursuits or alternative outlets like content platforms or international dating where dynamics feel more balanced. The panic manifests openly on social media. Post flood timelines with women questioning where all the good men went, demanding that men return to approaching, even suggesting men owe pre date or post date payments to cover preparation costs like makeup, hair, nails, and outfits. These requests strike many as unreasonable, especially when preparation expenses serve personal presentation rather than mutual benefit. The underlying desperation stems from financial strain. Without supplementary income from dates or relationships, covering rent, utilities, food, and other necessities grows increasingly difficult. Some women turn to side hustles like content creation on platforms such as OnlyFans. Yet, the reality there proves sobering. Recent statistics show the average creator earns around $130 to $180 per month after platform fees. With millions of creators competing for attention, most see minimal returns, far short of sustainable living expenses. The top earners capture the vast majority of revenue, leaving the average participant with pocket change that does little to offset rising costs. This economic squeeze affects women disproportionately in certain ways. As traditional safety nets erode and government resources remain limited or overstretched, the absence of male provision leaves a void that proves hard to fill. Women who once traded long term partnership for short term independence now confront the consequences. The government they sometimes positioned as a reliable alternative faces its own fiscal challenges, offering little rescue. Welfare systems strain under demand, and assistance programs fall short of covering inflated living costs. Many face the prospect of turning to food banks, shelters, soup kitchens, or even living in vehicles as options dwindle. Homelessness rises among single adults in this demographic, driven by job instability and lack of support networks once provided by relationships. Men, having found stability in solitude, show little inclination to reverse course. They prioritize their peace, recognizing that re entering the dynamic often leads to the same imbalances that prompted their exit. The narrative has flipped. Women who spent years punishing men for traditional masculinity now seek its return, but the offer no longer stands. Men have built lives without that role, discovering fulfillment elsewhere. This creates a stark divide. On one side, contentment and independence. On the other, urgency to reclaim what was once available but is no longer extended. The broader societal implications continue to unfold. Hookup culture, amplified by dating apps, contributed to the shift. Women gained access to vast attention and options, often leading to inflated expectations. Men face constant rejection or superficial interactions, eroding motivation to invest. Apps designed for quick connections warped perceptions of value, turning relationships into transactions where effort rarely matched reward. Many men concluded that solitude cost less emotionally and financially. They avoid the drama, the risks of false accusations amplified by cultural movements, the financial drain of dates without reciprocity. Gyms, hobbies, gaming, travel, these become fulfilling alternatives. Friendships with other men provide support without complications. The peace men describe proves real and sustainable. Women, meanwhile, grapple with delayed family plans, fewer compatible partners, and the realization that time does not pause. Biological clocks tick alongside economic ones. Those who prioritize career over family now face narrower windows for children, compounded by financial insecurity. The combination creates pressure that social media complaints only partially capture. Videos and posts show women urging men to step up, to show courage, to yearn again. Men respond with indifference or direct explanations. The cost benefit ratio no longer favors pursuit. Peace outweighs the gamble. This pattern repeats across contexts. In public spaces, men avoid eye contact or initiation to sidestep misinterpretation. In speed dating or social events, attendance skews heavily female as men opt out. Women express confusion or frustration, interpreting it as a failure of masculinity rather than a rational response to experience. Yet the evidence accumulates. Men who once intervened in conflicts now stand back, prioritizing self preservation over assumed protector roles. They question why they should risk for strangers when past efforts met criticism. Equality, they argue, means equal responsibility. If women demand independence, they receive it fully. The result is a generation of men content alone and women confronting the limits of that independence in practice. The shift did not happen overnight. It built through years of messaging that devalued male contributions while elevating female autonomy. Men absorbed the lessons. They stopped chasing, stopped providing unconditionally, stopped accepting one sided dynamics. Now, the consequences appear irreversible for many. Women rush to platforms begging for change, but men remain unmoved. They have tasted freedom and prefer it. The consequences of this widespread withdrawal extend far beyond individual dating experiences and reach into the structure of modern society itself. When large numbers of men opt out of the traditional provider role, the economic ripples become impossible to ignore. Women who once supplemented their income through casual dating provisions, weekend outings funded by others, or even longer term arrangements where financial help flowed naturally, now confront a budget reality stripped of those extras. Monthly expenses that seem manageable with occasional assistance suddenly demand full coverage from personal earnings alone. Rent in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago routinely exceeds $2,000 for even modest apartments. Groceries for one person average $400 to $600 monthly when inflation pushes prices upward year after year. Utilities, transportation, phone bills, internet, health insurance premiums all stack up quickly. For someone earning an average female salary in many fields, $35,000 to $50,000 annually before taxes leaves little margin after these basics. Subtract student loans, credit card debt carried over from earlier years, or childcare costs for those with children, and the numbers turn negative fast. The buffer once provided by male generosity vanishes, forcing choices between necessities. Skip a utility payment to cover rent, delay medical visits, cut back on quality food, or accept lower living standards overall. These trade offs accumulate stress, resentment, and a growing sense that the promised independence came with hidden costs nobody warned about clearly enough. Meanwhile, the cultural narrative that celebrated female self sufficiency continues unabated in media, corporate messaging, and educational institutions. Young women still hear that they need no man, that marriage represents optional at best, and oppressive at worst. That career ambition should eclipse family formation. Yet the practical outcome for many in their late 20s through mid 30s tells a different story. Fertility windows narrow with each passing year. Medical data consistently shows that conception rates decline noticeably after 35, dropping more sharply after 40. Women who delayed partnership in favor of climbing corporate ladders or enjoying single life now face statistics that become personal. Assisted reproductive technologies exist, but costs run tens of thousands of dollars per cycle with no guaranteed success. Insurance rarely covers them fully. Single motherhood by choice carries financial burdens that double when one income supports both parent and child. Childcare alone can consume half or more of take home pay in urban areas. The math forces difficult decisions. Continue pursuing the independent path and accept probable childlessness or attempt to pivot toward partnership at a time when fewer men remain open to it. The pivot proves challenging because the men who walked away did not pause their lives. They advanced careers, built savings, purchased homes, invested in retirement accounts, traveled, pursued passions. Their lifestyles solidified around self reliance. Inviting someone back into that structure after years of criticism feels like inviting risk rather than reward. Social media amplifies the disconnect vividly. Threads appear daily where women describe their frustration in detail. They detail perfect dating profiles with professional photos, detailed bios highlighting education, travel, fitness routines, career accomplishments, yet matches lead nowhere meaningful. Conversations fizzle after a few exchanges. Dates, when they happen, stay surface level or end without follow up. The common complaint centers on men lacking effort, ghosting, or displaying nonchalance that borders on disinterest. Responses from men in those same threads cut straight to the point. They reference past experiences where investment met rejection, where compliments triggered accusations of objectification, where paying for dates resulted in being labeled a meal ticket rather than appreciated. They point to statistics on false allegations, divorce initiation rates hovering near 70% when women file, custody outcomes favoring mothers overwhelmingly, and financial settlements that often leave men depleted. The cumulative effect creates a rational calculus. Why expend time, money, and emotional energy on a pursuit with such high downside and uncertain upside? Better to preserve resources for personal goals. This logic spreads through male spaces online and offline. Forums, podcasts, group chats, gym conversations all reinforce the same conclusion. Solitude delivers peace. Relationships under current conditions deliver complications. The shift affects broader demographics as well. Marriage rates continue declining across Western nations. Data from the United States Census Bureau and similar agencies in Europe show fewer people tying the knot each year, particularly among those under 40. Cohabitation rises, but even that arrangement carries risk for men, including potential common law implications in some jurisdictions or financial entanglements when separations occur. Birth rates fall below replacement levels in country after country. Governments express concern about aging populations and shrinking workforces, yet policy responses rarely address the underlying male withdrawal. Instead, emphasis remains on empowering women further through workplace initiatives, subsidized childcare, or extended parental leave that still primarily benefits mothers. These measures help some, but they do not restore the interpersonal dynamic that once encouraged family formation. Men see little incentive to participate when cultural messages continue framing traditional roles as problematic. Provider instincts get labeled controlling. Protector instincts get questioned as patriarchal. Leadership in relationships gets called domineering. The feedback loop discourages engagement entirely. Economic data further illuminates the pressure points. Women outnumber men in college enrollment now, earning more bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in many fields. On paper, this positions them for success. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. In practice, the jobs available often pay less than anticipated relative to debt loads carried. Many female dominated professions, including teaching, nursing, social work, administrative roles, face wage stagnation while requiring advanced credentials. Meanwhile, high paying sectors like technology, engineering, finance remain male dominated despite recruitment efforts. The result leaves a cohort of educated women earning respectable but not exceptional incomes, often insufficient for the lifestyle marketed as achievable through independence alone. Luxury apartments, frequent travel, designer clothing, high end dining become aspirational rather than routine without dual incomes or external support. The gap between expectation and reality fuels discontent. Social media feeds display curated success stories of women thriving solo, yet behind the filters, many quietly struggle. Credit card balances climb. Savings rates hover near zero. Emergency funds remain non existent for large percentages. When unexpected expenses arise, car repairs, medical issues, job loss, the absence of a partner to lean on becomes acutely felt. Men, conversely, report higher savings rates in surveys of single adults. They invest more aggressively in stock markets, real estate, retirement accounts. Their financial discipline stems partly from necessity, partly from freedom. Without obligations to fund dates, gifts, or household contributions in relationships, disposable income grows. Compound interest works in their favor over time. A man in his 30s saving consistently can amass significant wealth by his 40s, creating options rather than constraints. Women following similar discipline achieve comparable results. Yet fewer do, because cultural conditioning still encourages spending on appearance, experiences, and social signaling to attract partners. The irony persists. Efforts to appear high value through external markers drain resources that could build long term security. When attraction strategies fail to produce desired outcomes, frustration mounts. The cycle continues. International dating emerges as one response from men seeking alternatives. Platforms catering to connections overseas gain popularity. Men travel to regions where traditional gender expectations remain stronger, where appreciation for provision exists without immediate accusations of toxicity. Relationships form faster, marriages occur at higher rates, families start sooner. Women in those countries often value stability and partnership over hyperindependence. The contrast sharpens perceptions. Men return from such trips describing warmth, respect, mutual contribution that feels absent domestically. This trend accelerates withdrawal from local dating pools. Women notice fewer high quality men available locally. The ones remaining often prioritize foreign options or simply stay single. The domestic market shrinks further. Content platforms reflect these shifts too. OnlyFans and similar sites promised women financial independence through personal branding and direct monetization. Early success stories fueled hope. Yet saturation changed the landscape. With millions of creators, competition drives prices down. Average earnings remain low, as noted earlier. Most participants earn supplemental income at best, rarely enough to replace full time work or traditional support. The platform takes significant cuts. Marketing demands constant effort. Burnout sets in quickly. Many women discover the promise of easy money overstated. Meanwhile, men consume content selectively, spending far less overall than they once did on dates or relationships. The economics favor platforms over individuals. This leaves society at a crossroads. One path continues emphasizing individual autonomy above all else, accepting declining partnerships, falling birth rates, economic strain on single adults, particularly women facing biological timelines. Another path requires honest reevaluation of what sustainable relationships demand: mutual respect, contribution from both sides, appreciation rather than entitlement. Men signal willingness to engage when conditions feel fair. Women who recognize the changed landscape and adapt accordingly find more success. Those who double down on past demands encounter increasing isolation. The data trends point clearly. Without adjustment, the panic visible today grows louder tomorrow. The fallout from this male exodus reshapes entire communities in ways that statistics only begin to capture. Neighborhoods once filled with young couples buying starter homes now show more single occupancy units and rental turnover. Real estate markets in many mid sized cities adjust downward in family oriented suburbs as dual income households become less common. Builders report slower demand for 3 and 4 bedroom houses, while demand spikes for smaller condos and studio apartments tailored to solo living. Property values stabilize or dip in areas where traditional family formation once drove growth. School districts face enrollment declines in some regions, leading to classroom consolidations, teacher layoffs, and budget shortfalls that force tax increases or program cuts. Local businesses feel the pinch too. Restaurants that thrived on date night crowds see fewer reservations for two. Florists notice orders for romantic gestures drop sharply. Jewelers selling engagement rings and wedding bands report sluggish sales compared to a decade ago. The service economy tied to courtship and partnership contracts noticeably. Even gyms, once buzzing with couples training together or singles working to impress potential partners, now cater more to men pursuing personal fitness goals without external motivation. The cultural atmosphere shifts from one of paired activity to individual pursuit, with social events increasingly organized around same gender groups or mixed but explicitly non romantic gatherings. This transformation carries psychological weight that surfaces in therapy offices and mental health discussions. Therapists specializing in relationships note a surge in women seeking help for loneliness, anxiety tied to future uncertainty, and regret over choices made in their 20s. Many describe a pattern where career focus felt liberating at the time, but now leaves them questioning whether the trade off was worth it. They talk about scrolling through feeds filled with peers announcing pregnancies, anniversaries, or home purchases with partners, while their own timelines feature promotions, solo vacations, and achievements that feel hollow in private moments. The contrast breeds a quiet grief. Men in therapy, by comparison, often report relief rather than regret. They describe shedding the constant pressure to perform provider roles, to read subtle cues, to avoid missteps that could end careers or reputations. The freedom to say no without guilt emerges as a recurring theme. They invest in therapy for other reasons: personal growth, trauma processing, career stress, but rarely for dating related despair. The asymmetry in emotional outcomes reinforces the separation. One group mourns lost connection, the other celebrates reclaimed autonomy. Policy discussions begin to grapple with these trends, though responses remain fragmented. Some lawmakers propose incentives for marriage or family formation, such as tax credits for joint filers or expanded child tax benefits. Others push for paid family leave that applies equally to fathers, hoping to normalize shared parenting and reduce the perceived burden on men. Yet these measures address symptoms more than root causes. They do little to alter the interpersonal dynamics that drive men away in the first place. Cultural messaging still dominates headlines. Articles celebrate women breaking glass ceilings while rarely examining the downstream effects on partnership rates. Documentaries highlight successful single mothers or child free women thriving, framing those paths as empowering choices rather than sometimes necessary adaptations to circumstance. The narrative gap widens. Public discourse praises independence while private realities reveal its limits for many. Demographic projections paint a clearer picture of what lies ahead. Census forecasts show single person households becoming the most common household type in several Western countries within the next decade. Aging populations accelerate as fewer children enter the system. Pension systems strain under fewer workers supporting more retirees. Immigration policies tighten in some nations as governments seek to offset workforce shrinkage, yet cultural integration challenges persist. Women who remain single into their 40s and beyond face heightened risks of poverty and old age. Without accumulated wealth from dual income years or spousal social security benefits, retirement savings often fall short. Studies indicate single women over 65 experience poverty rates double those of married women in the same age group. The gap stems from lifetime earnings differences, caregiving breaks that interrupt career progression, and lack of shared assets. Men who stayed single fare better financially in later years due to consistent saving habits and fewer interruptions, though they report higher rates of social isolation if family ties weaken. Younger generations observe these patterns and adjust expectations accordingly. Teenage girls and boys growing up today absorb different lessons than their parents did. Girls hear mixed messages, pursue education and career aggressively, independence is non negotiable, yet they also see older sisters, cousins, friends struggling in ways that social media glosses over. Boys witness fathers, uncles, older brothers opting for single life or foreign partnerships and appearing content. They internalize caution around dating. Many express reluctance to approach at all, citing fear of rejection, misinterpretation, or legal risk, even in casual contexts. High school and college environments reflect this caution. Parties feature more group hangouts than paired interactions. Dating apps see lower male engagement among Gen Z compared to millennials at the same age. Organic meet cutes decline as people default to digital mediation, where algorithms control visibility and initial impressions. The result is a generation slower to form romantic bonds, delaying milestones like cohabitation, marriage, parenthood by several years compared to previous cohorts. Economic inequality compounds the divide. Men with high earning potential in tech, finance, trades, or entrepreneurship retain strong leverage in whatever dating market remains. They can afford to be selective, often choosing partners who bring complementary value rather than expecting provision to flow one way. Women in similar high income brackets face a smaller pool of equally successful men willing to commit under current conditions. Hypergamy expectations clash with reality when top tier men prioritize peace over partnership. Middle income and lower income groups experience the strain most acutely. Women in service, retail, administrative roles earn enough to survive, but rarely enough to thrive solo. The absence of supplementary support hits hardest here. Men in these brackets often conclude that dating adds financial pressure they cannot sustain, leading to higher rates of permanent singlehood. The class dimension becomes unmistakable. Affluent circles maintain higher partnership rates through assortative mating and shared values around balance. Working class and lower middle class communities show sharper declines in stable unions. Health outcomes begin diverging along these lines as well. Single men report better sleep, lower cortisol levels from reduced relational conflict, more consistent exercise routines when self motivated. Single women, particularly those in financial stress, show elevated markers for anxiety disorders, depression, sleep disturbances linked to worry about money and future security. Chronic stress accelerates physical wear. Medical literature links prolonged financial insecurity to higher risks of cardiovascular issues, immune suppression, metabolic disorders. The body keeps score when external support vanishes. Women who once relied on partners for emotional buffering or practical help during tough periods now navigate those periods alone. The cumulative toll manifests over time. Cultural production mirrors the shift. Films, television series, music increasingly portray single life as aspirational or at least normalized. Rom-coms decline in popularity or pivot to friendship-centered stories. Streaming platforms greenlight shows about chosen families, solo adventures, career-driven protagonists who reject traditional endings. Male-centric content celebrates bachelor lifestyles, financial independence, self-improvement journeys without romantic resolution. Female-led content sometimes explores the loneliness beneath the empowerment facade, though often framed as temporary or overcome through sisterhood rather than partnership. The entertainment landscape reflects lived experience more than prescriptive ideals. Religious communities face their own reckoning. Traditional faiths that emphasize marriage and family see attendance drops among younger adults who view those teachings as out of step with modern realities. Some denominations adapt by focusing on personal spirituality over marital status. Others double down on traditional roles, yet struggle to attract men who associate those roles with risk rather than reward. Secular alternatives fill the void for many, offering community through hobby groups, professional networks, online spaces where connection occurs without romantic expectation. The path forward remains contested. Some advocate returning to traditional courtship norms, arguing that mutual appreciation and clear roles benefit both sides. Others push for complete redefinition of relationships, emphasizing emotional equality, financial independence for all, flexible structures. Neither side fully persuades the disengaged majority yet. Men who walked away show little sign of mass return without fundamental changes in cultural tone and legal environment. Women who recognize the timeline pressure sometimes adjust approach, signaling appreciation, willingness to contribute equally, openness to traditional elements without shame. Success stories emerge in these cases. Partnerships form when both parties operate from reality rather than ideology. Yet, for the majority still caught in the old patterns, the clock continues ticking. Economic pressures mount. Social isolation deepens for some. Opportunities narrow as years pass. The panic expressed online grows from individual frustration to collective alarm. Conversations that once dismissed male withdrawal as immaturity now acknowledge its permanence for large numbers. Adaptation becomes necessary rather than optional. Those who adapt earliest fare better. Those who resist face steeper consequences. The trajectory of these changes accelerates in unexpected directions that few anticipated when the initial criticisms of traditional masculinity first gained mainstream traction. Workplace dynamics shift subtly but persistently as men recalibrate their professional behavior to minimize perceived risks. In corporate environments, many reduce informal mentoring of female colleagues, avoid one on one meetings behind closed doors, limit compliments on appearance or personal style, and steer clear of after work social events that could be misinterpreted. Human resources departments notice fewer harassment complaints overall, yet also report a colder interpersonal climate. Collaboration suffers in some teams where trust erodes and spontaneous idea sharing declines. Promotions for men sometimes come faster because they appear more focused, less distracted by relational complexities outside work, and more willing to take on high risk, high reward assignments without the pull of family obligations at home. Women in leadership tracks encounter a paradox. They gain ground in titles and pay in certain sectors, yet find fewer male peers willing to form genuine alliances or sponsor their advancement in the same way older generations did. The informal networks that once greased career wheels for both genders now operate more transactionally or not at all. Mentorship becomes formalized through official programs rather than organic relationships, losing much of its effectiveness. The result is a workforce that functions efficiently on paper, but feels increasingly atomized in practice. Housing patterns reveal another layer of adaptation. Single men increasingly purchase properties outright or with minimal mortgages, favoring locations that offer solitude, access to nature, or proximity to hobbies rather than family friendly school districts. Tiny home movements, van life conversions, and off grid setups gain traction among men in their 30s and 40s who prioritize mobility and low overhead over square footage. Women, by contrast, often remain in urban rentals longer due to job concentration and higher living costs relative to income. Co living arrangements for women rise as a practical response, with roommates sharing expenses well into middle age. These setups provide financial relief, but rarely emotional fulfillment equivalent to a committed partnership. The housing market bifurcates further. Luxury developments target high earning singles of both genders with amenities like concierge services, rooftop pools, and co working lounges. Affordable family housing stagnates or deteriorates in quality as demand softens. Developers pivot toward micro units and senior focused communities earlier than historical trends would suggest, anticipating a larger cohort of never married adults reaching retirement age without built in support systems. Consumer spending patterns adjust in tandem. Men redirect discretionary income toward durable goods, experiences, and self investment. High end audio equipment, gaming rigs, professional grade cameras, motorcycles, custom bicycles, wilderness gear. These categories see sustained growth. Subscription services for fitness, meditation, language learning, and skill building platforms thrive in male demographics. Women maintain spending on appearance related items longer than men do, driven partly by lingering social pressure to signal mate value even as the audience shrinks. Cosmetics, hair services, wardrobe updates, wellness treatments remain priorities for many, creating a financial drag when income does not scale accordingly. The beauty industry notices the strain. Premium brands report softening demand from middle income women while budget lines and dupes explode in popularity. Luxury segments hold steady among high earners, but the broad middle contracts. Retailers that once relied on date night outfits and weekend ensembles pivot toward athleisure and professional basics suited to solo lifestyles. Travel trends underscore the divergence. Solo male travel surges, with adventure tourism, digital nomad visas, and extended international stays becoming normalized. Men document journeys through photography, videography, and written accounts that emphasize personal discovery over romantic escapades. Women travel in groups more frequently, forming tight knit female friend circles that function as surrogate families. Solo female travel exists, but carries heightened safety concerns amplified by media stories and personal caution. Destinations once popular for honeymoons or couples retreats see declining bookings from Western travelers under 40. Places like Bali, Thailand, Colombia, and Eastern Europe attract growing numbers of single men seeking cultural experiences and, in many cases, more traditional dating environments. These men return with stories of mutual respect, clear expectations, and partnerships that feel reciprocal rather than adversarial. The feedback loop strengthens. More men explore those options. Fewer invest in local scenes that demand constant navigation of mixed signals. Education systems feel secondary effects over time. College campuses report declining male enrollment in many liberal arts and social science programs, where gender ratios already skew heavily female. STEM fields maintain stronger male participation, though even there, some young men opt for trade schools, apprenticeships, or entrepreneurship instead of 4-year degrees burdened by debt. The gender gap in higher education widens further, creating mismatches in partner pools down the line. Women with advanced degrees seek men with comparable credentials and earning potential. Yet the supply shrinks as more men bypass traditional paths altogether. Vocational training programs see male enrollment climb, producing skilled tradespeople who command solid incomes without massive student loans. These men often find satisfaction in tangible work, physical labor, and immediate financial rewards. They build lives around practical achievement rather than abstract status markers. Women entering similar trades remain a minority, though their numbers grow slowly. The overall picture shows diverging life scripts. One emphasizes credential accumulation and corporate ascent. The other prioritizes skill mastery, independence, and lower systemic entanglement. Media consumption habits reflect these separate tracks. Men gravitate toward long form podcasts, documentaries, technical tutorials, and content creators who discuss self reliance, fitness optimization, financial independence, and philosophical questions about purpose. Female audiences lean toward lifestyle vlogs, relationship advice channels, true crime series, and motivational content focused on empowerment and self care. Crossover exists, but the tonal difference stands out. Male oriented content rarely centers romantic pursuit as a primary goal. Female oriented content frequently addresses dating struggles, male behavior analysis, and strategies for attracting commitment. The divergence in focus reinforces the divide. Each side consumes narratives that validate existing world views rather than bridge them. Legal landscapes evolve in response to changing behaviors. Family courts handle fewer divorce cases overall as marriage rates fall, yet those that proceed often involve high conflict custody battles or contentious asset division. Men increasingly pursue prenuptial agreements even in cohabitation scenarios where legally enforceable. Some jurisdictions begin recognizing palimony claims or common law rights more stringently, prompting men to formalize boundaries earlier. Paternity fraud awareness spreads, leading more men to request DNA testing before signing birth certificates. Child support enforcement remains rigorous, but compliance rates among never married fathers sometimes lag when relationships never reached cohabitation or marriage. The cumulative effect discourages casual entry into fatherhood. Men weigh the lifelong financial and emotional commitment more deliberately. Women who desire children face narrower windows and fewer willing partners. Elective single motherhood via sperm donation rises among financially secure women, though the practice remains statistically small. Most confront the reality that biological and economic timelines do not align neatly with cultural ideals of independence. Community structures adapt unevenly. Suburban neighborhoods, once defined by block parties, youth sports leagues, and family oriented events, see participation drop. Men organize informal groups around shared interests like car clubs, shooting ranges, fishing trips, or pickup sports leagues that exclude romantic undertones entirely. Women form book clubs, running groups, wine tastings, and volunteer networks that provide social connection without partnership pressure. Both create meaning through chosen affiliation rather than default family ties. Yet the texture differs. Male groups tend toward activity based bonding with minimal emotional disclosure. Female groups often incorporate deeper personal sharing, creating stronger support during crises, but also amplifying collective anxiety when dating prospects dim. The longer arc points toward a society reorganized around individual rather than coupled units. Social safety nets expand in some nations to cover single adults facing old age poverty, though funding debates intensify as tax bases shrink relative to retiree populations. Innovation in elder care, robotics, and community living models attempts to fill gaps once covered by adult children. Technology mediates loneliness for many. Virtual companions, AI chatbots, immersive gaming worlds, and social VR platforms offer connection without the vulnerabilities of real world intimacy. Adoption rates climb steadily among both genders, though men report higher satisfaction with these substitutes because they demand less emotional labor. For those still seeking partnership, the market tightens into niche segments. Religious communities that maintain traditional teachings retain higher marriage rates among adherents. Intentional villages, polyamorous networks, and other alternative structures attract small but dedicated followings. Mainstream dating largely consists of casual encounters or short term arrangements rather than path to marriage trajectories. The institution of marriage itself morphs into a luxury good for the affluent and ideologically committed rather than a default life stage. The collective outcome emerges clearly over decades. A civilization built on declining pair bonding, lower fertility, slower household formation, and greater individual economic responsibility. Advantages appear in personal freedom, reduced conflict, accelerated self development for those who capitalize on solitude. Disadvantages surface in demographic contraction, strained welfare systems, heightened loneliness for segments unwilling or unable to adapt, and a cultural tone that feels colder, more guarded, less celebratory of interdependence. These shifts do not reverse easily. Momentum carries forward unless deliberate cultural, legal, and economic counterforces emerge with sufficient strength. For now, the path continues toward greater separation, with each side learning to navigate its chosen terrain. Men walk away and keep walking. Women confront the consequences and search for new footing. The story unfolds in real time, one quiet decision at a time. The long term reconfiguration of society under these conditions produces outcomes that ripple through institutions once considered stable and foundational. Public education systems, already strained by demographic decline, confront shrinking student populations in many districts across North America and Europe. Elementary schools close wings or merge entirely in regions where birth rates have fallen below 1.5 children per woman for over a decade. Teachers, predominantly female, face job insecurity or forced relocation as class sizes drop and funding formulas tied to enrollment tighten budgets. Extracurricular programs shrink. Sports teams consolidate. Arts and music offerings dwindle. The social fabric that schools once wove for entire neighborhoods frays as fewer children pass through the same hallways year after year. Parents who do have children invest heavily in private options or homeschooling networks, creating parallel systems that further fragment the public model. Educators report higher burnout rates among those remaining, partly from workload, but also from the sense that their profession serves a shrinking slice of the population rather than a broad societal need. Higher education follows a similar arc. Universities expand online offerings and international recruitment to offset domestic enrollment shortfalls. Many institutions quietly reduce tenured positions in humanities and social sciences while protecting STEM departments that attract consistent funding and male applicants. Campus life changes character. Social scenes revolve more around career networking events, professional development workshops, and skill building clubs than traditional party culture or casual dating. Fraternities and sororities lose relevance for large segments of students who view them as outdated or risky in an environment hyper aware of liability. Greek life membership declines steadily. Dating culture on campus becomes even more app dependent, with fewer spontaneous interactions and more premeditated low investment meetups. Graduation ceremonies feature growing numbers of single degree recipients who walk the stage alone, surrounded by proud but aging parents rather than partners or young families waiting in the audience. Healthcare systems brace for the consequences of delayed family formation and prolonged singlehood. Obstetrics and gynecology departments in some hospitals see declining birth volumes, prompting mergers of maternity wards or outright closures in rural and suburban areas. Fertility clinics expand rapidly to serve women in their late 30s and 40s pursuing IVF or egg freezing, yet success rates remain modest and costs prohibitive for most without substantial savings or employer benefits. Pediatric care shifts toward treating children of older parents who arrive with different health profiles and higher rates of certain genetic conditions. Geriatric medicine anticipates a surge in demand from never married adults without adult children to coordinate care. Nursing homes and assisted living facilities redesign models to accommodate residents who lack family advocates, incorporating more robust social programming, AI monitoring, and community integration efforts to combat isolation. Hospice services report higher proportions of patients dying alone or with minimal visitor logs. Palliative care teams train specifically in addressing end of life loneliness as a distinct clinical concern. Insurance industries recalibrate actuarial tables. Life insurance premiums for single adults without dependents trend downward in some brackets because mortality risk profiles improve slightly when individuals avoid the stress of contentious divorces or relational conflict. Health insurance plans see rising claims for mental health services among women in midlife who report chronic worry about financial security and social support in older age. Disability coverage adjusts as single adults lacking a spouse to provide informal caregiving file more frequently for conditions that might otherwise receive home support. Long term care policies gain popularity among women in their 50s who recognize the probability of needing institutional help without children or partners to assist. Premiums climb steeply for those purchasing later in life, creating another layer of economic pressure for those who delayed family building decisions. Corporate human resources strategies evolve to reflect the new reality. Recruitment messaging emphasizes work life integration rather than balance, acknowledging that many employees lack traditional family structures to balance against. Flexible hours, remote options, and unlimited PTO become standard partly because single employees use them differently, channeling time into personal projects, travel, or side businesses rather than childcare. Diversity initiatives expand beyond gender and ethnicity to include relationship status and family formation, though quietly to avoid backlash. Employee assistance programs add modules on financial planning for solo retirement, estate planning without heirs, and building non familial support networks. Wellness budgets fund gym memberships, therapy sessions, and hobby stipends more generously because companies recognize that engaged single employees often channel loyalty into the workplace when personal life offers fewer anchors. Tax policy debates intensify as governments confront shrinking worker to retiree ratios. Proposals surface to incentivize marriage through larger joint filing credits, higher child allowances for married couples, or penalties for prolonged singlehood disguised as lifestyle taxes. Opponents argue such measures infringe on personal freedom and punish those who choose independence. Compromises emerge in some countries, offering modest bonuses for cohabitation agreements or shared homeownership subsidies framed as housing affordability rather than family promotion. Wealth taxes or inheritance law reforms gain traction in nations facing acute demographic pressure, aiming to redistribute resources from childless estates to public systems supporting aging populations. These discussions remain politically charged, with younger voters resisting measures they perceive as coercive, while older voters demand solutions to pension shortfalls. International relations feel subtle effects. Countries with persistently low fertility adopt aggressive pro natal policies, including direct baby bonuses, extended maternity and paternity leave, subsidized housing for young families, and cultural campaigns celebrating parenthood. Nations that lag in these efforts experience accelerated population aging and labor shortages, prompting higher immigration targets. Yet, cultural compatibility issues arise when newcomers bring different gender expectations, sometimes clashing with host country norms around equality and independence. Brain drain accelerates in regions where young professionals, particularly men in technical fields, relocate to countries offering better economic prospects and less contentious dating environments. Global talent flows shift toward places perceived as offering stability, respect for traditional contributions, and clearer social contracts between genders. Philosophical and ethical conversations deepen in academic circles and public forums. Scholars examine whether the decline in pair bonding represents liberation from outdated constraints or a regression toward atomized individualism that undermines collective resilience. Ethicists debate the moral weight of choosing childlessness in an era of population contraction. Bioethicists weigh the implications of widespread assisted reproduction, surrogate markets, and genetic screening when biological parenthood becomes decoupled from partnership. Theologians across denominations grapple with adapting ancient teachings on marriage and family to a world where those institutions lose centrality for large segments. Public intellectuals split between those who celebrate the freedom of self directed lives and those who warn of civilizational fragility when intergenerational continuity weakens. Artistic expression captures the mood in fragmented ways. Novelists produce works centered on solitary protagonists navigating midlife without romantic anchors, exploring themes of quiet fulfillment or creeping regret. Filmmakers craft slow burn dramas about aging alone in beautiful but empty spaces. Poets and lyricists write verses that romanticize independence while subtly mourning its isolation. Visual artists create installations of single chairs in vast rooms, empty dinner tables set for one, mirrored hallways reflecting solitary figures. Music genres diverge further. Male driven trap, lo fi, and ambient tracks emphasize introspection, hustle, and detachment. Female led pop, indie, and R&B often circle themes of searching for genuine connection amid superficial options. The cultural output mirrors the lived split, with each side producing artifacts that speak primarily to its own experience. Everyday rituals adapt quietly. Holidays once centered on family gatherings become smaller or reoriented toward friend groups. Thanksgiving tables shrink or move to restaurants. Christmas mornings feature solo coffee rather than shared unwrapping. Birthdays pass with group dinners or self gifted experiences rather than partner led celebrations. Anniversaries fade from relevance for many. Social media feeds reflect these changes. Posts about engagements and baby showers grow rarer. Content shifts towards solo achievements, pet milestones, travel adventures, home renovation projects, career wins. The visual language of adulthood evolves from coupled milestones to individual benchmarks. Resilience emerges in unexpected places. Single adults build robust, chosen families through decades long friendships, professional networks, hobby communities, and online tribes. These bonds provide emotional scaffolding when blood relatives live far away or pass on. Mutual aid groups form for practical support, sharing tools, rides to appointments, meal trains during illness. Co housing projects for older singles gain traction, blending private units with shared kitchens, gardens, and common areas. Technology enables virtual kinship with group chats, video calls, and shared streaming watch parties, sustaining connection across distances. The capacity for adaptation proves stronger than pessimists predicted, though it requires deliberate effort that traditional family structures once supplied automatically. The overarching narrative solidifies into a new normal. Society reorganizes around the premise that romantic partnership is optional, provisional, and non essential for most adults. Economic systems adjust to higher proportions of single taxpayers, single homeowners, single retirees. Cultural expectations loosen around marriage and parenthood as markers of success. Individual flourishing becomes the primary metric measured in personal autonomy, financial security, creative output, and self defined purpose rather than relational status. The transition carries friction, loss, and reinvention in equal measure. For those who thrive in solitude, the era delivers unprecedented latitude. For those who do not, it demands resourcefulness and acceptance of trade offs once less visible. The transformation reaches into the fabric of daily routines in ways that alter even the smallest habits and expectations. Morning commutes in major cities grow quieter as fewer people share rides or coordinate schedules around partners and children. Public transportation sees shifts in peak hour patterns, with more single riders choosing off peak times to avoid crowds or simply because their work allows greater flexibility. Coffee shops that once buzzed with couples meeting for quick breakfasts now fill with individuals working on laptops, reading, or scrolling through content designed for personal consumption. Baristas notice regulars who order the same drink every day without variation, a small sign of stabilized routines, untethered from someone else's preferences. Evening hours stretch longer for many, filled with podcasts, workouts at home, online courses, or quiet hobbies that require no coordination. The absence of negotiation over dinner plans, movie choices, or weekend agendas creates space that some fill productively while others confront a subtle emptiness that creeps in during unstructured moments. Retail environments adapt to serve these evolving preferences. Stores stock more single serve meal kits, portion controlled frozen entrees, and individual sized produce packs. Appliance manufacturers promote compact versions of everything from washing machines to refrigerators suited to smaller households or studio apartments. Furniture lines emphasize modular pieces that one person can assemble and rearrange easily, with emphasis on multifunctional designs like sofa beds, storage ottomans, and wall mounted desks. Home decor trends lean toward minimalist aesthetics that feel intentional rather than sparse, using plants, lighting, and art to create warmth without needing shared input. The rise of pet ownership among singles spikes noticeably, with dogs and cats positioned as companions that offer unconditional affection without the complexities of human relationships. Pet product sales climb steadily, from premium foods and orthopedic beds to subscription boxes delivering toys and treats. Veterinary clinics report longer appointment books and more clients treating animals as primary family members, complete with birthday celebrations and holiday photos. Fitness and wellness industries capitalize on the solo focus. Gyms expand personal training packages and class schedules that cater to individual goals rather than couples workouts. Yoga studios offer more restorative and mindfulness sessions alongside power flows, recognizing that many attendees seek stress relief from career pressures or existential questions rather than physical sculpting alone. Running clubs and cycling groups proliferate as low pressure ways to build community without romantic expectations. Apps for tracking macros, sleep cycles, meditation streaks, and step counts see massive user growth, turning self optimization into a central organizing principle for many lives. Nutrition brands market meal prep services and protein powders with messaging around energy, focus, and longevity rather than aesthetics tied to dating appeal. The wellness economy grows robustly around the premise that personal health represents the most reliable investment when external support systems prove unreliable. Financial services tailor products to the realities of prolonged singlehood. Banks promote high yield savings accounts, robo advisors, and automated investing tools with interfaces that emphasize long term compounding for one person rather than joint goals. Credit card companies offer rewards programs heavy on travel, dining for one, streaming services, and home office upgrades. Mortgage lenders adjust qualification criteria to favor single borrowers with strong credit and consistent income, recognizing that dual income assumptions no longer hold for large segments of applicants. Estate planning attorneys see increased demand for wills, trusts, and powers of attorney among childless adults in their 30s and 40s who want to designate friends, siblings, or charities rather than default to spouses or offspring. Life insurance policies marketed as legacy tools gain traction, allowing individuals to leave bequests that support causes or people they value without relying on familial inheritance structures. Language itself evolves to reflect the changed landscape. Terms like partner, significant other, and life companion replace husband or wife in many casual conversations. Phrases such as my person or ride or die friend describe deep platonic bonds that fill roles once reserved for spouses. Dating becomes something people do sporadically rather than a default activity, with phrases like casually seeing someone or keeping things light dominating profiles and discussions. The word single loses much of its former stigma, reframed as a neutral or even positive status in professional bios, social media captions, and everyday speech. Expressions of sympathy for those who remain unattached fade as the condition becomes commonplace. Instead, congratulations flow for milestones like buying a home alone, completing a marathon, launching a business, or achieving financial independence. Public spaces redesigned to accommodate the shift. Parks install more benches oriented for solitary reading or reflection rather than paired seating. Libraries expand quiet zones and individual study pods while maintaining communal tables for those who prefer ambient company. Museums and galleries offer more audio guide options and self paced tours, catering to visitors who explore at their own rhythm without needing to synchronize with another person. Concert venues and theaters report higher single ticket sales, with apps allowing buyers to find adjacent seats with other solos if desired, or guaranteeing isolation for those who prefer it. Sports stadiums see more season ticket holders attending alone or with rotating groups of friends rather than fixed plus ones. The collective experience of crowds remains, but the micro dynamics within them change from coupled navigation to independent movement. The impact on volunteering and civic engagement varies by demographic. Men who walked away often channel time into skill based service like habitat construction, trail maintenance, or mentoring youth in technical fields. Women frequently gravitate toward causes centered on empowerment, animal welfare, environmental advocacy, or community food programs. Both groups report higher satisfaction when participation stems from personal conviction rather than relational obligation. Nonprofit organizations adjust outreach to emphasize flexible commitments, remote opportunities, and project based involvement that fit busy solo schedules. Leadership roles fill with individuals who bring expertise without the distraction of family demands, sometimes accelerating organizational momentum in targeted areas. Media industries continue adapting content pipelines. Streaming platforms greenlight more limited series centered on solitary protagonists facing internal conflicts rather than romantic entanglements. Reality shows pivot toward competition formats, survival challenges, entrepreneurial pitches, and skill based contests that reward individual performance. News outlets cover demographic trends with increasing frequency, framing stories around economic implications, housing crises, workforce shortages, and innovation in elder care. Opinion columns debate whether society should intervene through policy or accept the natural outcome of expanded personal choice. Podcasts dedicated to single living, financial independence, philosophical inquiry, and practical self sufficiency attract loyal audiences that rival those of relationship advice formats. Scientific research begins to quantify the effects more rigorously. Longitudinal studies track cohorts of adults who reached adulthood after the major cultural shifts, comparing health markers, wealth accumulation, subjective well being, and social connectedness across relationship statuses. Early findings suggest that happily single individuals often score comparably or higher on life satisfaction metrics than those in mediocre partnerships, though the unhappily single group reports lower scores than both happily partnered and happily single counterparts. Neuroimaging explores differences in brain activity related to reward processing when social support comes from chosen networks versus romantic bonds. Geneticists investigate whether certain traits associated with preference for solitude become more prevalent over generations through assortative patterns. Demographers model multiple scenarios for population trajectories, ranging from managed decline with robust immigration and automation to steeper contractions if fertility remains suppressed. Technological innovation accelerates to address emerging gaps. Robotics companies develop companion bots with conversational abilities, mobility assistance, and basic caregiving functions for aging singles. Virtual reality environments create persistent social spaces where avatars interact in ways that simulate community without physical presence. AI driven matchmaking attempts to refine algorithms by prioritizing compatibility in values, lifestyle, and long term goals over superficial attraction. Though, adoption remains cautious among men wary of platform incentives. Blockchain based co ownership models emerge for real estate, allowing unrelated adults to share property equity with clear exit terms. Digital legacy services help individuals curate online archives, memorial pages, and automated messages for after their passing. The cumulative weight of these adaptations points toward a future where interdependence becomes elective rather than assumed. Society learns to function with fewer automatic safety nets provided by family units, relying instead on diversified personal resources, institutional supports, technological proxies, and intentional communities. The transition proves uneven, with pockets of thriving autonomy alongside zones of quiet struggle. Resilience develops through trial and error as individuals and systems test what sustains meaning when traditional pathways narrow or close entirely. The era rewards those who build robust internal frameworks and diversified external connections, while punishing those who wait passively for conditions to revert to an earlier state. For large numbers, the question ceases to be about reversing the trend and becomes about navigating it effectively. Strategies that emphasize financial discipline, skill acquisition, health maintenance, meaningful work, and chosen relationships emerge as the practical toolkit for long term viability. The narrative shifts from loss to reconfiguration, from mourning what was to constructing what can be. The process remains ongoing, shaped daily by millions of small decisions that collectively redefine normal. The momentum of these societal adjustments creates feedback loops that reinforce separation rather than convergence. In professional settings, performance reviews increasingly highlight individual contributions over team dynamics that once assumed relational stability at home. Managers notice that employees without domestic obligations tend to volunteer for travel assignments, late night project sprints, or relocation opportunities that promise faster advancement. These choices compound over years into steeper career trajectories for those who remain unencumbered. Promotions cluster among the constantly available, the relentlessly focused, the ones who can answer yes to every urgent request without consulting a partner's schedule or children's needs. The workplace becomes a meritocracy tilted toward solitude by default. Those who do maintain partnerships often find themselves explaining absences, declining stretch assignments, or negotiating flexibility that signals divided loyalty to some decision makers. The subtle bias accumulates. Single professionals climb ladders more steadily, while partnered ones navigate trade offs that slow momentum. Over time, the executive suites and boardrooms reflect this pattern with higher proportions of lifelong singles or those who partnered later after establishing themselves independently. This professional divergence feeds back into personal economics. Higher earners accumulate assets at rates that outpace inflation and lifestyle creep. Investment portfolios grow through consistent dollar cost averaging into index funds, real estate holdings in appreciating markets, or stakes in private ventures. Debt loads stay minimal because major life expenses like weddings, honeymoons, fertility treatments, or private school tuition never materialize for many. The financial gap between consistently single high achievers and their partnered counterparts widens noticeably by mid career. Single women in demanding fields sometimes match or exceed male counterparts in earnings, yet still face the same relational market constraints that limit partnership options. The irony sharpens when accomplished women discover that their success narrows the pool of men they consider suitable while simultaneously making them less inclined to compromise on traditional provider expectations. Men at similar income levels often prefer partners who bring emotional steadiness, domestic contribution, or complementary lifestyles rather than duplicate career intensity. The mismatch persists and deepens. Urban planning departments begin to respond to census data showing sustained growth in one person households. Zoning boards approve more mixed use developments with studio and one bedroom units stacked above retail and office space. Sidewalk infrastructure improves with wider paths, more benches, better lighting, and public Wi Fi to support the pedestrian patterns of solo residents who walk, bike, or scooter to work and errands. Parks add features like outdoor fitness stations, reading nooks with charging ports, and dog runs that double as social hubs for pet owners. Community centers pivot programming toward adult education classes, skill sharing workshops, and hobby meetups that attract participants seeking structured interaction without romantic pressure. Libraries stock more self help sections on financial independence, estate planning, and building non familial networks while maintaining robust fiction and biography collections that explore themes of solitude and self discovery. Transportation networks adapt to changing ridership. Ride sharing companies report higher demand for solo trips rather than shared or family sized vehicles. Electric scooter fleets expand in dense areas where single adults prefer quick, low commitment mobility over car ownership. Bike share programs thrive as commuting and leisure cycling become normalized ways to stay active and independent. Public transit agencies experiment with flexible routing and on demand shuttles in suburban zones, where traditional fixed lines lose riders to remote work and declining family sizes. The infrastructure of movement tilts toward efficiency for individuals rather than convenience for groups. Food culture shifts in parallel. Meal delivery services emphasize customizable single portions with options for dietary precision, portion control, and minimal waste. Grocery chains dedicate more shelf space to ready to eat item, pre cut produce, and small batch artisanal products that appeal to discerning solo cooks. Cooking classes transition from couple focused date nights to solo skill building sessions where participants learn techniques for batch prepping nutritious meals or mastering complex dishes for personal enjoyment. Restaurant reservation platforms notice a rise in bookings for one, with some establishments adding solo friendly seating like chef's counters, communal high tops, or small tables positioned for people watching rather than intimate conversation. Tipping culture adjusts informally as servers recognize that solo diners often tip generously when service feels attentive without hovering. The entertainment economy realigns around individual consumption. Subscription bundles grow for streaming, music, gaming, and audiobook services because single adults maintain multiple active accounts without needing to negotiate shared logins or content preferences. Live event promoters offer more single ticket packages with assigned seating that guarantees personal space. Comedy clubs, improv theaters, and spoken word nights draw crowds of unattached adults seeking laughter and intellectual stimulation in low stakes environments. Stand up specials increasingly address the humor in navigating modern singledom, from the absurdity of dating app fatigue to the quiet victories of building a life exactly as desired. Gaming communities expand massively as virtual worlds provide persistent social layers that feel meaningful without requiring physical proximity or emotional vulnerability. Personal style evolves to signal self sufficiency rather than availability. Wardrobe choices emphasize quality basics, versatile pieces, and investment items that last rather than trend driven outfits designed to attract attention in nightlife settings. Men favor functional clothing suited to hobbies and travel, with durable fabrics and practical pockets. Women lean toward polished yet comfortable looks that project competence and confidence in professional and casual contexts alike. Grooming routines simplify for many, focusing on maintenance rather than daily transformation. The beauty industry sees growth in men's skincare lines and unisex products, while premium makeup and hair services hold steady among those who still view presentation as a form of personal armor. Mental health resources expand to meet demand from both sides of the divide. Therapists develop specialized practices around prolonged singlehood, helping clients process ambivalence about partnership, build self worth independent of relational validation, and cultivate fulfilling routines. Support groups form for adults who never married or who exited long term relationships and chose not to re enter the fray. Online forums and moderated communities provide spaces to share strategies for financial planning, health management, and social connection without romantic subtext. Mindfulness and Stoic philosophy gain renewed popularity as frameworks for accepting what cannot be controlled while maximizing agency over what can. Journaling apps and habit trackers become daily tools for tracking mood, gratitude, progress toward goals, and moments of contentment. The educational pipeline continues to adapt. Trade schools and certification programs see enrollment surges from young men seeking quick entry into well paid fields like welding, HVAC, electrical work, plumbing, and heavy equipment operation. These paths offer immediate income, job security, and respect for tangible results without the debt or extended timeline of university degrees. Women increasingly pursue similar vocational routes in growing numbers, though many still concentrate in healthcare support, early childhood education, and administrative certifications that pay less reliably. The skills gap narrows in some trades as diverse cohorts enter, yet wage disparities persist across gendered occupational clusters. Corporate training programs incorporate modules on managing diverse life stages, recognizing that assumptions about employees having spouses or children no longer apply universally. Leadership development retreats emphasize personal vision and resilience over team building exercises rooted in familial metaphors. Succession planning accounts for longer working lives as retirement ages rise and pensions weaken. Companies offer phased retirement options, consulting contracts, and mentorship roles that allow seasoned single professionals to remain engaged without full time demands. The cultural memory of traditional family life fades gradually. Younger adults encounter stories of grandparents' marriages as historical curiosities rather than aspirational models. Television reruns from earlier decades feel quaint when characters fret over dating etiquette or wedding planning that no longer resonate with current norms. Children's books and school curricula update to reflect varied household structures, presenting single parent, blended, chosen family, and solo adult homes as equally valid. The default imagery of adulthood shifts from nuclear family portraits to diverse snapshots of individuals pursuing distinct paths. Global comparisons highlight different responses. Nations with strong collectivist traditions maintain higher marriage and fertility rates through social pressure and extended family support. Western individualism accelerates the trend toward voluntary singlehood. Yet some countries experiment with hybrid models that blend personal freedom with structural incentives for partnership. The contrast sharpens international migration patterns as individuals seek environments that align with their preferred balance of autonomy and connection. The overarching story settles into acceptance of plurality. No single script dominates. Some thrive in committed partnerships that evolve to meet modern realities. Others flourish in deliberate solitude, enriched by chosen bonds. A middle group navigates ambivalence, testing options without full commitment. The culture accommodates all three without privileging one as inherently superior. Meaning derives from alignment between personal values and lived circumstances rather than conformity to external benchmarks. The era rewards authenticity over performance, discipline over entitlement, and quiet consistency over dramatic pursuit. The patterns solidify into generational habits that younger cohorts inherit almost unconsciously. Children raised primarily by single mothers or in households where one parent works extended hours absorb a worldview where emotional and financial interdependence appears optional or even burdensome. They watch adults prioritize career stability, personal hobbies, and self care routines over the visible sacrifices that traditional partnerships once demanded. These kids grow up viewing marriage as a high risk contract rather than a natural milestone. By the time they reach dating age, many approach relationships with preemptive caution. They set firm boundaries around time, money, and emotional availability from the outset. Conversations about exclusivity happen earlier and more explicitly. Expectations around shared finances remain guarded. The default mode becomes parallel lives that occasionally intersect rather than fully merged ones. This cautious stance reduces heartbreak frequency, but also slows the formation of deep attachments. Breakups, when they occur, feel less catastrophic because investment stayed limited. The emotional insulation becomes a learned skill passed down through observation. Adolescents and young adults in this environment turn to digital spaces for connection that feels safer than real world vulnerability. Group chats, Discord servers, Twitch streams, and subreddit communities provide constant background companionship without the pressure to perform romantically. Avatars and usernames allow experimentation with identity while maintaining distance. Memes and inside jokes create belonging that does not require physical presence or sustained emotional labor. Gaming clans function as surrogate brotherhoods or sisterhoods, offering loyalty, shared purpose, and accountability in ways that mirror traditional kinship but without the same obligations. Streaming culture normalizes solo viewing parties where thousands watch the same content simultaneously, laughing at the same moments, typing reactions in real time, feeling part of something larger while remaining physically alone. The sense of community persists even when the screen turns off because the next session waits just a refresh away. School environments reflect this digital first socialization. Classrooms feature more individual headphone use during independent work periods. Group projects get completed through shared documents and asynchronous messaging rather than in person collaboration. Extracurricular clubs lean heavily on online coordination with fewer face to face meetings. Teachers adapt by incorporating digital tools into lessons, assigning virtual debates, collaborative slide decks, and peer reviews conducted through learning management systems. Social dynamics shift toward status earned through online presence rather than hallway charisma. The popular kids often maintain strong followings on platforms where content creation, humor, or niche expertise translate into influence. Romantic interest sometimes begins in comment sections or direct messages before ever progressing to real life interaction. The threshold for rejection lowers because digital ghosting carries less immediate sting than a public brush off. College and early career years extend this pattern. Many students live in single dorm rooms or off campus studios rather than shared suites. Roommate agreements include clauses about noise levels, guest policies, and personal space boundaries that resemble lease contracts more than communal living pacts. Social life centers on events organized through group chats or event apps rather than spontaneous dorm hangouts. Greek life continues declining as young people associate it with outdated hierarchies and liability risks. Instead, affinity groups based on academic major, career interest, political leaning, or fandom form the primary social circles. Dating remains sporadic and low commitment for the majority. Hookup culture persists in pockets but loses dominance as more young adults report preferring solitude or casual friendships over repeated short term entanglements. The fear of emotional entanglement outweighs the temporary thrill for a growing segment. Entry level workplaces encounter a workforce already conditioned to prioritize personal boundaries. New hires negotiate remote work options aggressively, citing productivity and mental health rather than family responsibilities. They set auto replies for after hours messages and guard weekends fiercely. Managers learn to communicate expectations clearly upfront because assumptions about availability lead to friction. Performance metrics shift toward output over face time. Annual reviews emphasize deliverables, skill growth, and initiative rather than team player intangibles that once favored those willing to stay late or attend every happy hour. The culture rewards self starters who manage their own schedules and energy without relying on others for motivation or accountability. Financial literacy becomes a core competency drilled into young adults earlier than previous generations. High school curricula in many districts include mandatory personal finance courses covering budgeting, credit scores, compound interest, emergency funds, and basic investing. Apps gamify saving and investing habits with streaks, badges, and visual progress trackers. Young people open Roth IRAs or brokerage accounts in their late teens or early 20s, often starting with small recurring contributions from part time jobs or allowances. The mindset treats money as a tool for independence rather than a resource to be shared in relationships. Debt aversion runs strong. Student loans get paid aggressively when possible. Credit card balances stay low or zero. The goal becomes building a personal safety net robust enough to weather job loss, health issues, or economic downturns without needing to lean on anyone else. Housing preferences among those in their 20s and early 30s favor flexibility over permanence. Lease terms shorten to 6 or 12 months. Many opt for furnished apartments or co living buildings that handle utilities and maintenance. The ability to relocate quickly for a better job or lifestyle change outweighs the appeal of building equity early. Some embrace nomadic lifestyles, moving between cities every few years to chase opportunities or experiences. Digital nomad visas gain popularity as remote work normalizes. These young adults accumulate stories, skills, and networks rather than fixed assets. Homeownership enters the picture later, often after significant savings and career stability, and frequently as a solo purchase rather than a joint venture. Travel becomes a central pillar of identity for this cohort. Passport stamps and photo albums fill with landscapes, city skylines, cultural festivals, and adventure activities pursued alone or in loose groups of like minded travelers met through apps or hostels. Budget airlines and hostels make international trips accessible. Long weekends turn into week long escapes. Sabbaticals or gap periods get used for extended backpacking or volunteer stints abroad. The experiences build resilience, broaden perspectives, and create a reservoir of personal narratives that substitute for family milestones in conversations. Social media posts focus on sunrises over mountains, street food discoveries, or quiet moments in foreign cafes rather than couple selfies or engagement announcements. Health consciousness intensifies as a form of self preservation. Annual physicals, dental cleanings, vision checks, and mental health appointments become non negotiable calendar items. Wearables track sleep quality, heart rate variability, steps, and stress levels with data feeding into personalized recommendations. Nutrition focuses on sustained energy and longevity rather than rapid physique changes. Intermittent fasting, Plant forward meals, hydration goals, and supplement regimens gain widespread adoption. Gym routines emphasize functional strength, mobility, and recovery over aesthetics tied to dating appeal. Mental health practices like journaling, breathwork, cold exposure, and nature immersion serve as daily maintenance rather than crisis intervention. The concept of legacy evolves beyond biological children. Many channel energy into mentoring younger colleagues, creating open source projects, writing blogs or books, starting nonprofits, or building businesses that outlive them. Creative output becomes a way to leave a mark. Podcasts, YouTube channels, newsletters, and art portfolios document personal philosophies and discoveries. Philanthropy grows among those who accumulate wealth without dependence. Donations support causes aligned with individual values rather than family oriented charities. The idea of impact shifts from raising the next generation to influencing contemporaries and successors through ideas, resources, and example. Friendships take on greater weight as primary relationships. Decades long bonds form around shared values, humor, and mutual support during life transitions. Friends become emergency contacts, power of attorney designees, and chosen family for holidays and milestones. Group trips, annual reunions, and standing video calls maintain closeness across distances. The emotional labor once reserved for romantic partners redistributes across these platonic networks. Vulnerability emerges in trusted circles without fear of romantic rejection or imbalance. Loyalty gets demonstrated through consistency rather than grand gestures. The broader cultural tone settles into pragmatic acceptance. Media coverage of demographic trends moves from alarmist headlines to analytical pieces exploring adaptation strategies. Documentaries profile thriving singles in their 50s and 60s who built meaningful lives through career, creativity, community, and self mastery. Books on solo living top bestseller lists with practical guides to finances, housing, health, and social design. The conversation normalizes singlehood as a valid path rather than a temporary phase or failure state. Society adjusts expectations downward for universal marriage and parenthood while expanding support structures for diverse life arrangements. The long arc reveals a civilization learning to sustain itself with fewer automatic ties between individuals. Cohesion comes from voluntary association, shared interests, economic self reliance, and technological mediation rather than default kinship. The model proves durable for those who embrace its logic. Challenges remain for those who long for deeper interdependence but find fewer willing participants. The balance tips toward individual sovereignty as the organizing principle. Meaning emerges from within rather than from without. The era belongs to those who master solitude without letting it master them. The quiet accumulation of these individual choices creates a society where the center of gravity has shifted decisively toward personal sovereignty. Institutions that once relied on predictable family units to absorb social and economic shocks now operate on thinner margins of assumption. Pension funds recalibrate projections, assuming longer working lives and fewer dependent claims from surviving spouses. Social Security in the United States and equivalent systems elsewhere face actuarial pressure not only from aging populations, but from a smaller proportion of contributors who ever qualified for spousal or survivor benefits. Governments experiment with universal basic services in some jurisdictions, providing baseline health care, housing vouchers, or income supplements calibrated for single adult living costs rather than family thresholds. The policy logic moves away from incentivizing marriage or childbirth toward cushioning the individual against isolation and poverty in old age. Critics call it surrender to decline. Proponents frame it as pragmatic adaptation to irreversible behavioral trends. Corporate succession planning now routinely includes scenarios where key executives have no immediate heirs or spouses to consider in relocation or estate matters. Boards prioritize candidates who demonstrate unconflicted availability and long term focus. Executive search firms quietly note that single leaders often accept international postings or turnaround assignments without hesitation. Compensation packages evolve to include more equity grants, deferred compensation, and lifestyle perks like sabbatical banks or concierge services that support solo decision making rather than family oriented benefits such as dependent tuition assistance or spousal relocation support. The C suite increasingly resembles a collection of high functioning solo operators who view the organization as their primary legacy vehicle rather than a means to support a household. Philanthropy patterns shift in tandem. Major donors without children direct endowments toward causes that reflect personal convictions rather than dynastic continuity. Foundations focused on scientific research, environmental preservation, education reform, animal welfare, and civil liberties receive larger shares of bequests from childless estates. The traditional model of family foundations passing wealth through generations gives way to lifetime giving vehicles where donors maintain active control until the end. Charitable trusts proliferate among affluent singles who want structured impact without the administrative burden of heirs. The cultural conversation around legacy reframes from biological reproduction to intellectual, institutional, or societal imprint. A successful life becomes measured by the durability of ideas, organizations, or systemic changes one helped create rather than the number of descendants carrying the name forward. The legal profession sees sustained demand for specialized practices. Elder law attorneys expand services around incapacity planning, guardianship alternatives, and digital asset disposition for those without close relatives. Probate courts handle more intestate estates where distant cousins or state escheat laws become default beneficiaries. Contract law adapts to accommodate co ownership agreements between unrelated adults who pool resources for real estate, vehicles, or small businesses with clearly defined exit clauses and dispute resolution mechanisms. Prenuptial and cohabitation agreements grow more common even among couples who never plan to marry, reflecting a broader cultural acceptance that relationships carry financial risk that should be mitigated up front. Family courts, while handling fewer divorces, see increased filings for palimony, property partition among long term cohabitants, and custody disputes in non traditional arrangements. In media consumption habits continue to diverge along gender and generational lines. Men gravitate toward content that reinforces self mastery themes, long form essays on stoicism, technical deep dives into finance or engineering, historical analyses of individual agency in turbulent times, and documentaries about explorers, inventors, and entrepreneurs who succeeded outside conventional structures. Women maintain stronger engagement with narrative driven formats that explore interpersonal dynamics, emotional intelligence, relational psychology, and stories of women overcoming systemic barriers or redefining success on their own terms. Streaming algorithms learn these preferences quickly, feeding each viewer an increasingly tailored diet that solidifies existing worldviews rather than challenging them. Cross pollination occurs rarely because the emotional tone and pacing differ so sharply. The result is two partially parallel cultural ecosystems operating within the same platforms. Literary output mirrors this split. Contemporary fiction from male authors often centers solitary protagonists confronting existential questions through action, discovery, or intellectual pursuit. Plots advance through personal quests, professional challenges, or philosophical reckonings rather than romantic arcs. Female authored novels frequently examine the tension between autonomy and longing, the cost of independence, the search for authentic connection in a landscape of guarded interactions. Nonfiction shelves stock growing numbers of titles on mastering solitude, designing intentional single life, financial independence for one, and building meaning without partnership or parenthood. Bestsellers include practical manuals on estate planning without heirs, curating chosen families, and thriving in midlife as a permanent solo adult. The genre of memoir evolves to celebrate lives built on self determination rather than relational milestones. The arts scene adapts to smaller, more fragmented audiences. Independent theaters stage one person shows and intimate monologues exploring isolation, resilience, and self reckoning. Galleries feature works that emphasize interiority, abstract pieces evoking solitude, minimalist installations suggesting absence, photographic series documenting empty domestic spaces made beautiful through deliberate curation. Music festivals offer more daytime programming and wellness stages alongside traditional nightlife, recognizing that attendees often arrive alone and seek experiences that nourish rather than merely entertain. Live performances incorporate audience participation elements that foster temporary community without requiring sustained commitment. Religious institutions face existential questions about relevance. Congregations that emphasize family ministry see attendance drop among younger adults who associate faith with outdated gender roles or pronatalist pressure. Progressive denominations pivot towards spirituality centered on personal growth, social justice, and contemplative practice. Traditionalist groups maintain higher retention among those who value clear structure and intergenerational continuity, yet struggle to attract new members from the broader culture. Many younger seekers turn to secular equivalents, meditation retreats, philosophical reading groups, ethical societies, or nature based rituals that provide transcendence without doctrinal baggage. The search for meaning persists, but the container changes from inherited tradition to self assembled practice. Environmental movements gain unexpected allies among those who see childlessness as a personal contribution to planetary limits. Discussions about ecological footprint include voluntary non reproduction as a legitimate choice rather than a tragedy. Activists frame lower birth rates in affluent nations as a partial offset to consumption patterns, shifting focus toward lifestyle changes, policy advocacy, and technological solutions rather than shaming individuals for demographic outcomes. Conservation organizations receive larger donations from child free donors who view land preservation, species protection, and climate mitigation as their lasting legacy. Scientific communities confront the implications for research continuity. Fields that once relied on generational knowledge transfer through family dynasties or long apprenticeships adjust to shorter institutional tenures and higher mobility. Mentorship programs formalize to compensate for fewer organic relationships. Collaborative networks expand globally through digital platforms, allowing expertise to flow without geographic or relational proximity. Breakthroughs continue, driven by individuals who channel ambition into discovery rather than lineage. The cumulative effect produces a civilization that runs leaner, quieter, more deliberate. Systems designed for density of human connection thin out, replaced by efficiency tuned to individual throughput. Emotional bandwidth, once allocated to family maintenance, redirects toward personal projects, civic participation, creative work, and selective friendships. The texture of daily life feels less crowded, yet more intentional. Moments of loneliness surface predictably during holidays, anniversaries, or quiet evenings, but many learn to meet those moments with acceptance rather than panic. Tools for self soothing mature: weighted blankets, sound machines, aromatherapy, journaling prompts, guided meditations, pet companionship, virtual reality escapes, all calibrated to provide comfort calibrated to one person. The narrative no longer centers on what was lost, but on what becomes possible when the old obligations recede: freedom to relocate without consultation, resources directed solely toward personal goals, decisions made without compromise, time structured around internal rhythms rather than external demands. For those who embrace the shift, the trade off proves worthwhile. Fulfillment arrives through mastery of self, contribution to chosen causes, and quiet pride in a life shaped by conscious design rather than default expectation. The path forward remains open ended. Some segments double down on individualism, pushing boundaries of what a single life can achieve in creativity, wealth, influence, and personal peace. Others quietly seek hybrid arrangements that preserve autonomy while allowing measured interdependence. A small but growing minority returns to traditional models, finding value in mutual commitment amid a culture that no longer enforces it. The plurality persists. No universal prescription emerges because none fits every temperament or circumstance. Society learns to function with lower baseline connectivity. Cohesion holds through overlapping networks of interest rather than dense familial webs. The experiment continues in real time, with each generation inheriting a slightly altered set of assumptions and tools. The outcome will not be utopia or collapse, but a sustained rebalancing toward greater individual agency within a collective framework that has grown more elastic and less prescriptive. The final stretch of this long examination brings the picture into sharpest focus: a world where the old architecture of human connection has been dismantled piece by piece, not through some grand catastrophe, but through millions of rational, incremental decisions made by individuals responding to real incentives and real disincentives. The result is not chaos. It is order of a different kind: colder, more modular, more self contained. People still interact, still cooperate, still form attachments, but the default unit of social and economic organization has become the single adult rather than the couple or the nuclear family. This reorientation touches every layer of existence at that, from the mundane rhythm of a weekday morning to the grand sweep of civilizational continuity. Consider the infrastructure of care in later life. Nursing homes and assisted living facilities, once designed around the assumption that adult children would visit weekly and coordinate decisions, now build models explicitly for residents who arrive without that backup. Staff training includes modules on how to facilitate chosen family visitation schedules, how to interpret digital directives from distant friends rather than immediate kin, how to manage end of life conversations when no one holds legal next of kin status. Memory care units incorporate more robust digital memory walls where residents can scroll through curated photo albums, voice recordings, and video messages uploaded by friends, former colleagues, or online communities. The emotional labor of caregiving spreads across paid professionals, technology, and loose networks of volunteers rather than concentrating in blood relatives. The system functions, but the warmth feels different, more professionalized, less instinctive. Funeral homes adjust their service menus accordingly. Traditional large family gatherings give way to smaller memorial events organized by friends or professional planners. Obituaries list chosen family members alongside or instead of biological ones. Cremation rates climb higher because scattering ashes in meaningful locations aligns with lives built around personal significance rather than ancestral plots. Memorial donations replace floral tributes as the norm, with funds directed toward causes the deceased championed during life. The ritual of saying goodbye becomes more individualized, less standardized, reflecting the diversity of paths that led to that final moment. The economy of inheritance transforms in parallel. Wealth passes laterally more often than vertically. Siblings, nieces, nephews, close friends, charities, and scholarship funds receive larger shares when no direct descendants exist. Estate attorneys draft increasingly complex instruments to ensure assets support specific visions. A trust that funds annual fellowships in a particular field. A foundation dedicated to preserving a beloved wilderness area. A grant program for young entrepreneurs in a niche industry the deceased mastered. The transfer of resources becomes a final act of agency rather than an automatic handoff to the next generation. Tax codes in some jurisdictions begin to recognize these non traditional bequests with favorable treatment, acknowledging that societal benefit can flow through channels other than familial descent. Education systems facing sustained enrollment pressure consolidate further. Rural school districts merge across county lines. Urban campuses repurpose empty buildings into mixed use community hubs that serve adults as much as children. Vocational and technical tracks expand aggressively because they deliver quicker returns on investment for young people who see little point in accruing debt for degrees that may not translate into stable family supporting careers. Apprenticeship programs gain prestige as pathways to respected, well compensated work that allows independence without the prolonged adolescence once associated with extended higher education. Curricula incorporate mandatory modules on personal finance, mental health maintenance, legal literacy for solo adults, and strategies for building non familial support networks. The goal shifts from preparing students for family life to equipping them to thrive, regardless of whether partnership materializes. The workplace culture of the future crystallizes around assumptions of individual primacy. Performance management systems reward outputs that do not depend on team synergy rooted in shared domestic stability. Hybrid and remote options become permanent fixtures because they accommodate the preferences of a workforce that values control over schedule and the environment. Corporate wellness programs expand to include financial coaching sessions, estate planning workshops, and seminars on designing intentional social circles. Employee resource groups form around life stage affinities rather than traditional identity categories. Groups for lifelong singles, for those pursuing child free lifestyles, for midlife career pivoters, for digital nomads embedded in corporate structures. The office becomes less a place of obligatory socializing and more a functional hub for collaboration when needed, with quiet zones, focus pods, and reservable private offices standard. Consumer markets continue their pivot toward the single adult standard. Housing developers build more compact, high quality units with premium finishes in walkable neighborhoods. Furniture brands emphasize pieces that one person can move and reconfigure easily. Kitchen appliance companies market smaller capacity ovens, induction burners designed for single meals, and smart refrigerators that track inventory for one user. Automotive manufacturers promote vehicles optimized for solo drivers, compact crossovers with advanced driver assistance systems, ample cargo space for hobbies or travel gear, and infotainment systems that integrate seamlessly with personal digital ecosystems. The entire retail experience tilts towards convenience, customization, and immediacy, because the decision maker is always one person acting alone. Leisure industries follow suit. Theme parks offer more single rider lines and solo friendly attractions. Resorts market wellness retreats and adventure packages built around individual transformation rather than couple escapes. Cruise lines expand solo cabins with social mixers for unattached travelers who want optional company. Streaming services invest in interactive content that adapts to solitary viewing. Choose your own adventure formats, ambient soundscapes for background immersion, and community watch parties that connect viewers without requiring physical co presence. The entertainment dollar chases experiences that deliver personal satisfaction without needing a partner to share the moment. The psychological landscape stabilizes around a new equilibrium. Loneliness metrics plateau at higher levels than historical norms, yet reported life satisfaction among the voluntarily single climbs as people master the skills of self companionship. Therapy practices specialize in helping clients distinguish between healthy solitude and pathological isolation. Mindfulness retreats sell out months in advance because participants seek structured ways to sit comfortably with their own thoughts. Self help literature moves beyond empowerment cliches toward granular advice on curating routines, managing seasonal affective dips, and finding purpose when external validation structures weaken. The cultural script no longer promises that everyone finds their person. It promises instead that a well constructed life can stand on its own foundation. International migration flows adjust to these realities. Young professionals relocate to cities and countries that offer the best combination of economic opportunity, personal safety, cultural acceptance of single living, and robust infrastructure for solo adults. Places with strong social welfare systems, efficient public transport, abundant green space, and vibrant third place communities attract those who want independence without abandonment. Nations facing acute demographic contraction compete aggressively for skilled immigrants by advertising lifestyle advantages tailored to unattached workers, tax incentives for singles, subsidized housing for solo occupants, streamlined pathways to citizenship for high contributors without family ties. The global talent market becomes more fluid as people chase environments that match their preference for autonomy over rootedness. The story of humanity enters a phase defined by conscious design rather than inherited momentum. Reproduction becomes a deliberate project rather than a default outcome. Those who choose parenthood do so with full awareness of the trade offs, often later in life, often with fewer children, often with extensive planning around finances, career flexibility, and support networks. Those who opt out do so without apology, redirecting energy toward other forms of creation and stewardship. The species persists, but at lower density, with slower growth, and with greater emphasis on quality of individual experience over sheer quantity of lives lived. In the end, the question is not whether the old model could have been preserved. It could not. The incentives shifted too decisively, the feedback loops locked in too firmly, the cultural messaging too consistent over too many decades. The relevant question becomes how gracefully the transition occurs, how equitably the burdens distribute, how creatively people build meaning in the new configuration. The evidence so far suggests resilience rather than fragility. Humans adapt. They always have. This time, the adaptation looks different. Quieter streets, smaller households, leaner institutions, deeper self reliance, more selective attachments, longer horizons of personal responsibility. It is not the world many imagined they would inherit, but it is the one they are shaping day by day, choice by choice. Two, the 1 hour gang who stayed locked in from the very beginning, all the way through this final stretch. Massive respect for riding out the entire journey. You have just absorbed one of the most comprehensive breakdowns of what is really happening to modern relationships, economics, culture, and society that exists anywhere. If these Angry Guy sessions have consistently delivered the raw clarity, the unsparing detail, and the long view perspective you came for, show your support by grabbing me a Red Bull through the link in the description. Everyone keeps the engine running for more work like this. Head to the comments right now and drop your final thoughts on the whole arc. What part of this picture hits you hardest? What prediction do you think will prove most accurate 10 or 20 years from now? Do you see yourself or people around you already living pieces of this future? Agree, disagree, add nuance, whatever it is, lay it out straight and honest. Like the video, if the full series delivered real value to you, do not forget to subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive. And if any part of this opened your eyes or confirmed what you already suspected, share the video with others who need to see the complete map of where things stand and where they are headed. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.